So last week we started discussing the mitzvah of Asiyah Sukkah, Yeshiva Sukkah, the whole issue with the Shachiyanu, the switching of the days, the first night and second night, and other Shachiyanu issues. And then I discussing last week, what was it this week? On Sunday, I started discussing the issue of the famous Torah who brings down, when he talks about the mitzvah of Sukkah, so he all of a sudden he starts going into the whole history and why do we sit in the Sukkah, L'man Yedu, Dorisechem, Kibesukah Toshafti. Usually the Torah is a halachic sefer, so it's not the normal style for him to go into all the reasons behind it. So why over here, by Sukkah, does the Torah go into all the explanations? So there's a famous Gemara in Bava Metzia, Daf Kuf Tezvav, that talks about the concept of Darshin and time of the Kra. That there's a discussion in the Gemara whether you can take the reason for a mitzvah and then limit or expand the scope of the mitzvah. So for instance, the Mishnah, the Gemara talks about the widow. You can't take collateral from a widow. That's it. Doesn't tell us why. This says you can't take collateral from a widow. So the assumption is because a widow doesn't have anyone supporting her, she doesn't have money, maybe it's before life insurance, and therefore the assumption is you don't want to take her last thing away. So the Gemara has a interesting discussion. Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon. What about a wealthy widow? She was independently wealthy, she has a lot of money. Then could you take collateral from her? So the Rabbi Yehuda says no. Eino darshinan time Kra. When you're learning Talmud Torah, it's all about darshin and time Kra. Learning lamdis, giving the shir. When you're passing halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Yehuda, we don't have a right to go ahead and take a reason and say, you know what? Okay, this no longer applies. Maybe I'll do this today. We don't have a right to do that. And Rav Shimon says, yes, you do. Darshin and time Kra. Rav Shimon says you have a right to take the. Again, not us. The Chachamim, whoever. Talmidei Chachamim have a right to go and take the reason and then either limit or expand the scope of the mitzvah. And so Rabbi Yehuda says you can't take even from a wealthy widow, and Rav Shimon says you can. And then the Gemara quotes an apparent contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, the Torah says that a king cannot have many wives, because the concern is they might take him away from Avodas Hashem. So Rabbi Yehuda writes, however, if you marry quote-unquote good wives that take you can't marry one wife that's going to take you away, but you can marry 100 wives as long as they're all going to take you in the right direction. So they asked, Rabbi Yehuda says, ain't no darshin and time in the Kra. Now he's darshin and time in the Kra. The Torah says you can't have many wives, and he says, but that's only if they're going to take you off the derech. So the Gemara answers there's a fundamental difference. When does normally, and we pass in like Rabbi Yehuda, ain't no darshin and time in the Kra. That's the rule. That's the halacha. However, except that the Torah itself gives the reason for the mitzvah. The Torah itself says, don't take many wives because they're going to take you away. So if the Torah already gives me the reason, then I have a right to go ahead and be darshin and time in the Kra. So that's why. So Rabbi Yehuda's normally, if it says stam, he's not darshin and time in the Kra. Rav Shimon is. And it's, I think, interesting that Menachem Zember, he points out Rav Shimon, which he touched in the famous Rashi, will have a Parshas Toldos or somewhere around there. But when Esav Soni, it says halacha v'yadua she'esav Soni es Yaakov. So what do you mean halacha v'yadua? What kind of halacha? Halacha Moshe Misinai? Like what does it mean? The derech ha'olam, halich, some other word. What do you mean halacha v'yadua? So even Rav Shimon, who normally is darshin and time in the Kra, he says, don't worry, when it comes to anti-Semitism, there's no reason. You can't be darshin and time. If you have too much money, not enough money, you want Israel, you don't want Israel. So it's Rav Shimon, who normally, even Rav Shimon is more than when it comes to Esav, Soni, and Yaakov, you can't come up with any logical reason. But either way, that's the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon. We normally are passing out Rabbi Yehuda, and when the Torah itself gives the reason, so we do accept it. And as the Shita Mekubet says, even takes it a step further. Some Rishonim, according to the Gemara, it has to be mefurish b'kra. The reason has to be in the pasuk. Some Rishonim even say, even if it's not in the pasuk, but it's something obvious, like the Torah tells you can't muzzle your ox or your animal while you're working it. And what's the reason why you can't muzzle your animal? Because Sar Balei Chayim. It's not right. The animal has to eat. When it's working, so therefore it has all the food in front of it. So in order, and the Gemara has a whole discussion about whether Sar Balei Chayim is Daraisa D'Rabbanan. We paskin Sar Balei Chayim is Daraisa, but it's very unclear what the exact source is. I think some Svarim quote 13, 14 possible sources. So where do we know that's true? Some quote the incident by Bilam, others quote here. But whatever the source is, we paskin Sar Balei Chayim is Daraisa. So therefore you can't muzzle an ox while it's working. So the Shita Mu'et is there, as he quotes one of the other Rishonim. What happens if the animal is working in a yard where there's poison to eat or something that's going to be harmful for him? So then, am I allowed to muzzle my ox? So he said, of course you can. The whole point is, it's understood that the whole reason for, when something's so implicit, even though it's not explicit, but it's so clear what the reason behind the mitzvah is, so then some even say, you could be darshin in time of the krah, then of course you'd have to put the muzzle on, or else the whole point is to avoid Sar Balei Chayim, and that's which is 90% of the times. In the case over here, so one is still, even then, some Rishonim say you could be darshinan. And also we had the Mishnah in Sanhedrin we've discussed before about Kfura.
Is that only because it's obvious, or because it works against the Etzem mitzvah itself? Because
right.
I think the Almana is also obvious.
Right, exactly. It's more that obvious in the sense that it's within the whole mitzvah itself. But correct, and that's where Shimon says everything's obvious. Like you could, but right, it's more than just, it has to be more than just a regular. And in this case, it's the opposite of what the whole mitzvah, the whole purpose. That seems to be more like the one by Kfur, same thing. It's the opposite. The whole purpose is Sar Balei Chayim, so then when it's in the course, that's obvious. But other cases, we're not going to be darshin in time in the krah because that's the whole machlokas. Or a similar case by Kfura, we know the halacha is cover teporena bayomahu or when you can't leave a body over, especially in Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, they're very machbid, they're usually to bury right away. So, and even in Chutz La'aretz we try to. However, the Mishnah says halano yolado, if a family member or some serious causes that you want to push off the burial to the next day, it's a question whether 24, 48, how far you reach a point where that's too far also, but within a reasonable amount, you let the kids come in from Israel or wherever they are, Australia, and they come back. So then the halacha is you push off the funeral to the next day. What's going on here? Kavatik Bareno. So again, it's the same issue. The whole purpose of burying a body right away is kavod hames. We assume it's in contrast to other religions that put the body out, the wake, and they do it all up. We hold the biggest kavod is to put the body in the ground right away, because based on the mystical concept that that's when the kapara begins. And that's why in Eretz Yisrael, the way it should be is they bury them directly in the ground, because in the ground apparently the body decomposes quicker. The quicker the body decomposes, the quicker the atonement. That's why. So therefore, in Chutz La'aretz, the minig is, since we have to follow North American rules. Well, some people don't, and maybe they do this. There are some people just go directly. Some people have a coffin, but they don't use it. They just put the body underneath. But most people want to follow the Dina Malchus, the Dina. It's not against halacha, because it's l'chadchila. It's the Malchus Rishonim, whether it has to be directly in the ground. We pass it as long as it's in a coffin in the ground. That's also, you can't just put it in a coffin on top of the ground. That doesn't work. But as long as it's in a coffin in the ground, we pass and that's okay. So it's not going against halacha. So what most people do is they put they get earth from Eretz Yisrael, they put it in the coffin, they make holes on the bottom in order to try to fulfill going from earth to earth. But the halacha is, the reason why we do it, we want a very simple wood. You want it to decompose, and you can get the atonement. So the whole purpose of an immediate burial is kavod hames. So in a scenario where that person would want this person, the family members there might be a bizayon if they're not there. So therefore, again, so it's built in the same thing. If the whole purpose is kavod hames, so by doing something which isn't kavod hames, so similar like the famous Nod of Yehuda, just similar idea, nothing to do with this in that sense, but the famous Nod of Yehuda by autopsies. In other words, we know there's an issue of nivel hames. There's an issue of, again, there's nothing wrong with autopsies per se. Autopsies are a good thing. And maybe 5-10 years from now, maybe they'll reach a point where it won't even be a halachic issue if it's not intrusive in the ways of working it out. But the Noda Yehuda, we know there's an issue d'oraisa of autopsies. However, he says, but there's exceptions to the rule. So what's one the major exception is? If a person's murdered, and in order to put the person behind bars, and number one, this payback for the crime, and keep them off the street to killing other people, whatever the reasons may be, so it would be bigger covenant. It would be a bizayin hameis to let this person go. No autopsy, let him go around murdering more people, and just don't go. So clearly, in this case, it would be covenant hameis to do an autopsy in order to put the person behind bars. Or another exception is the issue of, let's say there's a infectious disease going around, and a person walks into a hospital, they don't know, no idea what's going on, and they try to save the person, and he dies, and then the guy 5 minutes later comes in and he has a similar thing. So as the Noda writes, Kol Milofanov, if you have a sick person in front of you, so that's enough of a tzarach. Of course, Bisman Hazeh, and I heard to point out, that doesn't mean you have today with modern technology. Maybe they could be in Israel. Someone could be in Dallas and still be Chol Milofanov. Today with modern technology, you can use your information right now and say so that's the post can bring down as a much more broader definition today. It doesn't have to be literally right next to you. But we don't normally assume, for the sake of general science, that's considered bizayin hameis. But if there's a pressing need, so we permit it. So if the whole purpose is kavod hameis, you're not going to do something which is the opposite. So that's what they point out by Tzlura as well. And then they point out as well, it's the famous Yisod as well, the end of the Torah, the 613th mitzvah, according to many of Ksivas Sefer Torah. There's a mitzvah writing a Sefer Torah. It's a whole discussion then how come most people do not fulfill or it doesn't appear that they write or they appoint the shliach to write their own Sefer Torah. There's different reasons given why most people don't fulfill it. Some say it's too much money, 25,000, whatever it costs, 20,000, but others don't like that exemption, because that only applies, they say, if let's say, rule of an esrog. That would mean in 1 year it's too exorbitant, so you don't have to buy it. But the next year you're going to do it, the year after that. But a one-time shot, they say, some Achronim say, the exemption. Because if that's the case, then we wouldn't have to have kids then. Who could afford to have kids? And therefore they don't like that exemption. Others say, based on the Gemara and Kiddushin, that we're not Bekian anymore. We don't know exactly how to write a kosher Sefer Torah with Hidura. Again, what do you mean? Am I being Motzi Laz on every table? We make brachas on it, so we assume the mistakes that are in Ma'aki, like a Vav and Aaron, that we might not know. But whether it's Karnas or Karnos, putting the blood on one corner or all four, that we have a Kabbalah on. So some point out the reason why we don't do the mitzvah, since you can't really do the mitzvah anyway. I guess apparently it's enough to make the brachas and read it, but it's not Bidura. But
so it was done at one time?
Apparently, according to each reason, if it was the affording reason, then probably not. According to this, right? According to this, that he probably came up with this answer afterwards. And then the third answer is the same answer.
By Sforim or something.
Yeah, the Rush. The Rush that he says, what do you mean? We do fulfill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, but the mitzvah has changed. Today the mitzvah is buying Svarim, writing Svarim, taking notes at a shir, buying an odd scroll Gemara, whatever Svarim you use. That's the mitzvah. I thought Taryag mitzvahs are eternal. How dare the Rush talk Apikarsis, the mitzvah changed? So that's what the Achronim point out, the same Yisod here. When do we say, but normally Eino Darshin in time at the Krah? But the Torah itself gives me the reason for the mitzvah that I am Darshin in time at the Krah. So the whole purpose of writing a Sefer Torah is to facilitate Torah learning. So it used to be, during those days, they used to actually, before the printing press, they used to take out a Sefer Torah, apparently, 5 people sharing, taking out and actually learning through it. Today it's just it's a Sefer Shel Kavod. We take it out Monday, Thursday, we bring it out for Shabbos. We don't really use that for learning. We have our own Svarim. So therefore he says, the mitzvah has changed. It's a discussion, is there any Indian still of writing a Sefer Torah? Is he saying, the mitzvah no longer exists, or in addition to another way of fulfilling the mitzvah. That's a discussion in how far you take the rush, whether it's instead of or in addition.
Where does it say the reason?
No, it's also something the pasuk says. So therefore, the whole purpose is, that's the whole discussion in terms of whether it's true. The Rishonim get into what is the nature of the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. Because if you inherit a Sefer Torah, Pashas even says you don't get it. So if it's the purpose is they get into, maybe you can't do a mitzvah b'shei v'alpeh. There's a whole, it's a separate share of the nature of the mitzvah of Ksiva. But that's the same. But the Yisrael we care about is the Torah itself gives the reason. If the Torah gives the reason, so then we have a right to be darshin on time in the crop. So that's
the shutfas, and you buy a letter. People are making fundraisers to buy letters.
Yes, that was right. That was
shutfas considered part of Ksiva Sefer Torah. You did shutfas, you bought a letter.
Right, that's
one letter for $5.
So that's the whole right. That's the whole question. Many years ago, maybe I remember Lubavitch doing this. This probably goes back 20 years ago or whatever it was. Or people go around, So again, so it's a question. So kisfu lachem, whether it has to be your own, whether part is. So I don't think the purpose was to fulfill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, but the more was more to mishtatif, and there's nothing you can definitely do it. Whether you could still do the other ways to be yotzei. It's a big shy if you can fulfill your mitzvah that way, but it's a good idea anyway. Why not to give money, for a Sefer Torah? But it'd be questionable if you got the mitzvah now. So that's what they point. That's what the pshat of the Torah here. Why is the Torah giving reasons for Sukkot? After I look at the schach and I remember that I'm not buying it in Home Depot, I'm going to have to spend the good. That we look at the schach and think of the mitzvah of what happened when the Jews left Mitzrayim. So why is the Torah, the whole discussion, the Machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva, whether it's Anei HaKavod or it's Sukkot Mamish, it's actually different gerses. We assume, the standard way is assume Rabbi Eliezer says Anei HaKavod and Rabbi Akiva says Sukkot Mamish, but the different places where they switch them around. And some point out it's Rabbi Eliezer L'Shitason who holds you need a diras keva. We pass in diras arai, but if you need a diras keva, then obviously you have to go with Anei HaKavod. If you hold Sukkot Mamish, then clearly it's a diras arai. So it's a whole discussion. So the Torah goes into whole because he says, and that's what the Bach points out. Why is the Torah is a halachic sefer? He's telling me it's not enough. Normally, mitzvah strichas kavana. Normally, we have a general halacha, as we've discussed many times. The concept of mitzvah require intent, and we paskin on a mitzvah daraisa. We assume even b'diavad, and a mitzvah drabanan that you're yotzei even without it. But so they point out. So sukkah, besides the general kavani need, if I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm sitting in a sukkah because of what God told me to. In addition to that reason, but there's a second level of understanding that is required. You have to know why you're sitting in the sukkah. And in fact, the Bach says it as a lichatchila. That lichatchila, in addition to the general mitzvah strichas kavana, which is generally I'm doing a mitzvah from God. It's not enough here when it comes to sukkah. Have to go ahead and actually think about the sukkah's mamish, the Anei HaKavod, etc. And that, in fact, the Orach Lanier, he even says the b'diavad. He even says li'ikuva. We don't paskin that way, but he even says li'ikuva. If you don't have that kavana, you don't fulfill that mitzvah. That's what the Torah is getting at, because the Torah itself gives the reason for the mitzvah. Like some write, if you're wearing, I think it's a mechilta and bow, that someone who's learning Torah is exempt from tefillin. Normally we assume most things it doesn't apply to Talmud Torah, or else that's it. You drop it. But in terms of here, what is the Torah? Torah Hashem. But what's the purpose of wearing tefillin? To have Torah in your mouth. Okay, I'll do even better. I'll actually learn Torah, and so the same type. We don't pass in that way, but the same type of idea. That's what the Bach says the lechatchila, the Aruch Lanier says it b'diavad. In fact, it's an interesting discussion. The Achronim, I think the Mishnah Brura even raises this issue about the issue. Let's say you are sitting in the sukkah and you don't have that kavanah. So he has Achronim have a whole discussion on this. Maybe you're mavatel your mitzvah aseh. In other words, we know, let's say by tzitzis. By tzitzis, if you're not wearing a four-corner garment, so technically you're not obligated in tzitzis. But if you're wearing a four-corner garment and then you don't put tzitzis on, it's worse. you better don't wear a four-corner garment, because they discussed the issue. Perhaps sitting in the sukkah and not having that second level of understanding, maybe I'm violating. That gets into this famous minchas chinuch of what exactly what is the mitzvah of yeshiva sukkah? Is it just a mitzvah aseh? And if I don't do it, I'm just mavato mitzvah aseh? Or is there an isser aseh? Or is there a negative commandment to eat chutz sukkah? So the minchas chinuch has a whole discussion on it. And one of his famous nafkaminas is, I had a funeral. I mean, I'm sure it's probably not uncommon, but I did a funeral on Wednesday, and also when Rabbi Green's sister passed away in Montreal, so he actually went to Montreal. He had the funeral, and they're going to go back. The halacha is, it's a whole. In other words, the halacha is you do the kfura, but we know there's no avelos on yantif, so because the mitzvah of simcha da'aseh, mitzvah d'rabim, the public mitzvah of simcha overrides the private mitzvah of avelos. And as we discussed before, the famous machlokes Rambam and Tosfos, what's pshat in the Gemara. Everyone agrees to the conclusion, but they argue in lamdis. The Rambam shita is, and the Svardim avelos yom rishon is daraisa. That's the Svardi shita, and they hold also simchas yantav is daraisa. Even bizman, that's a whole discussion. We don't have the Beis Hamikdash. But the Rambam Shita, and the Rav had a whole discussion, the ultimate simchas with Nei Hashem Elokechem, and you don't need Basar V'Yayin. So the Rambam Shita is simchas daraisa today, avelos is darabanan today. So the mitzvah simcha darabim daraisa, the Rabbim pushes off the private mitzvah daraisa of avelos. And Tosfos is L'shitasan b'nei Ashkenaz. We assume all avelos is darabanan, even avelos yom rishon, and we assume, like Tosfos, that the only time you have simcha daraisa is in the Beis Hamikdash with the Basar Shlamim, and it's only darabanan today. So you learn the Gemara, mitzvah darabim darabanan beats out a mitzvah darabim dayachid. So therefore it's the same conclusion, but just different lamdas, whether they're both daraisa or both darabanan. In fact, that leads to Hilchos Gedolos, others to raise the following question, which would be halacha maisa for those people.
The Rambam only holds the daraisa for the Misa and the Kfura on the same day, right?
Right. So within the Svardi Shita, so some say, which is more rare today, but right. Some say it's dafka only if you have the Misa and Kfura on the same day, but if the Misa is one day, Kfura then it wouldn't be, right.
So if it's not the same day, then how do you work it out?
You mean how would you work that?
It's not, now the avelos is not daraisa, and the simcha is.
Well, okay, so that leads to this next point I'm getting to right now. Then, so what about the following case then? So let's say you have mitzvah derabim derabanan versus mitzvah deraisa diyachid. Then what would we know? You have a public deraisa beats a private deraisa. A public derabanan beats a private derabanan. What about a public derabanan? Right, that's right. So that'll be the nafkamina, right? So that's the. So which was that the nafkamina would be is, as Alex has pointed out, Simchas Torah and Chutz La'aretz. It's Yom Tov Sheni. So according to the Svardim, assuming it's Daraisa, so then they'd start, the avelos would begin on Simchas Torah, because the mitzvah derabim, because the mitzvah of avelos is daraisa. Well, that would be the question. You have a case. That would be the case. On Simchas Torah, do you have avelos or not? So that gets into a shaila. So that's a machlokas rishonim. What wins? Is the mitzvah derabim derabanan beat out avelos diyachid daraisa or not? That's the famous Gemara we spoke about many times in brachas, memches, memzayin, around there. That when Rabbi Lezer went to shul one day, he was really wanted a minyan badly. There were only 9 people. He was willing to free his slave, spend a lot of money giving up on his slave, and he got the minyan. So the Gemara said, how could he do it? What do you mean? There's an issue. Oh, abahem ta'avod. You're not going to free a slave. How could he go ahead and do it? So, because they talk about mitzvah b'av. There's a conclusion the Gemara is for our purposes, the different cases and gittin. But for our purposes, the conclusion is, you're right. Mitzvah derabim shani. A public mitzvah is different. The simple pshat, the public mitzvah is tefillah b'tzibor, a kaddish, something in davening. So the public mitzvah of tefillah b'tzibor beats, which is derabanan, let's assume, beats out the isser Asay Daraisa freeing a slave. So we see from this Gemara, it seems to be a raya that what? That from this Gemara we see a public rabbinical mitzvah beats out a private Daraisa.
Minyan is the Rabbanon?
The what?
Minyan is the Rabbanon?
Yeah. It's fact, maybe it's just an Eitzah Tova, but it's a discussion. It's not a, if you hear any Muslim shmuz, you'll never think it's Daraisa. I'm not saying you should. I'm not downplaying it, but halachically speaking, it's probably not Meikar Adin. But again, not because of the minyan. I mean, you get into if you're putting yourself in a situation where you're not doing, you could do, kriyas. You get into other issues why you should do it. But from a pure halachic point of view, it's definitely not Daraisa. It's even a question if it's D'Rabbanan or this minyan chassidus. But
Minyan's Daraisa. There's other cases where you're not Daraisa.
Right, that was the famous rush that by Parashat Zachar. So he says not to say it, but maybe we will say it. And maybe it's no raya. You could argue that we're talking about the Zechiras Amalek, which is a daraisa. So maybe that's why he freed the slave. It was Shabbos Parashat Zachar, and he says don't say it was. But I'm saying that means other people are saying it if he's telling me not to. And therefore, at least anyway, al pi lamdis, you could argue that maybe there wouldn't be a raya then, because maybe it's a public mitzvah daraisa. So that's a machlokas among the Rishonim to halacha l'maisa. So what we do is halacha kedivrei hamekel ba'avelis. So you count Simchas Torah as day one, but you don't start sitting until Monday. That's how you
can do kavura too.
You do the regular kavura because it's covered on mace, and yes, right. That's the whole. So that's the whole. You do kavura, so therefore that's the whole question. Where the minchas comes up by an onain. So let's say on what?
It'd be the same as Purim. It's not just the last day of Yom.
Yeah, well, Purim, it's a discussion whether Purim is a further discussion whether we assume it's a problem or not, right? But right. So what happened was so until you do the burial, you're an onain. So we know the halacha is by an onain. Onain is the time in between the death and the burial. So an onain is pater min ha-mitzvahs. The onain is exempt from doing mitzvahs. And the din deraises we don't have today. Ma'aser Sheni, Karbanos. The Rava we used to say it's a misnomer in the Shulchan Aruch. It should be Meisa Mutu Lafana, but it was too long to write, so he just kept it under Hilchas Aninis. But it's not really Aninis, but it's a separate halacha which is connected to Aninis, but it's a din of Petur Min HaMitzvah. So it's the beginning of the third parak in Brachas. Machlok is Rashi and Tosfos. Why? What's Pshat? Why? What do you mean onin is pater Min HaMitzvahs? Pater Aval Mutter or pater Aval Asar? So the Rashi writes, he seems to say the reason is you get osik b'mitzvah or tier to the mitzvah. It seems to be because the reason why you're exempt from the mitzvah is because you're not in the right frame of mind. But if I could rise above the occasion and get it, then go ahead, then go for it, then you can do the mitzvah. And Tosfos goes to Yerushalmi, no. It's Loleg L'Rush. It's a concept we don't walk into a cemetery with a sitzusal or learn in front of it. It's a concept you're making a mockery of the dead, so to speak. So Tosfos goes to Yerushalmi, it's an Isser. You can't do those. I can do mitzvahs, you can't. So therefore it's like making fun of the mace, so to speak. So therefore we don't do it. So therefore we pass like Tosfos. Not only is it pater, but it's usher. One is prohibited, or you cannot do. You're exempt from it. You don't do mitzvahs when you're in onain. So what do you do then if you want? So what do you do if you want to eat bread then? So you have to fast because there's a issur to eat bread without washing. So what do you mean? So they point out that what you do is pitzkei tshuva, for example, you wash without a bracha. So you're washing. So what's the what kind of compromise? You wash your hands without a bracha. Why am I doing that? So you point out because it's an Isser D'Rabbanan to eat bread without washing your hands. There's a Mitzvah D'Rabbanan to wash your hands before eating bread. So out the Mitzvah D'Rabbanan only pater min ha-mitzvahs. But it only can't go to McDonald's, and only is still chayiv in the negative commandment. He's only pater from the positive mitzvahs. So out the Mitzvah D'Rabbanan he's exempt from. So what is the only reason he's washing his hands is to avoid the Isser D'Rabbanan of eating bread without washing your hands. So the halacha is chazal or only kavei a bracha when you're doing a mitzvah aseh. If you're doing something just to avoid an issur, we never make a bracha. We do avoid isurim, but we never make a bracha when we're doing something just to avoid an issur. This is what an onin is doing. He's just washing his hands to avoid the issurs. That's why there's no bracha. So that's what the Minchas Chinuch raises here. What about an onin then? He's patim in our mitzvahs, so he can't eat in the sukkah. But is there an issur to eat chutz sukkah? So if you hold there's only a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah, but there's no issur chutz to eat inside. But if you hold there's an issur to asi to eat it outside the sukkah, so then the onin eats in the sukkah without a bracha. The outs the mitzvah leishe basukah, the mitzvah basukah's teisha, that he's exempt from. The only reason he's eating in the sukkah is to avoid the potential issur. So then there's no bracha. So that's what the Yisodi writes here.